There was a time, not so long ago, when the city of Qamara was known for the quality of its dreams. Travelers would speak of how they slept more soundly within its walls than anywhere else in the world, how they woke with poems half remembered on their lips and solutions to problems that had troubled them for years. The city's lamp keepers, it was said, tended not just the lanterns that lined the streets, but also the gentle boundary between waking and sleeping, ensuring that the passage from one world to the other remained smooth and kind. Alina had grown up understanding this, though she had never quite believed it in the way children believe in solid things. Her father, Rashid, was the eldest of the lamp keepers, a man whose hands smelled always of oil and starlight. Each evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, he would walk the old quarter with his long brass lighter, touching flame to wick in a rhythm as steady as breathing. Alina often walked beside him, carrying the oil can or the cleaning cloth, learning the language of light and shadow that her family had spoken for 7 generations. On the evening when everything began to change, the air held a peculiar stillness. Alina noticed it first in the marketplace, where the spice merchants were packing away their saffron and cardamom with unusual quietness, their usual banter replaced by thoughtful silence. She noticed it in the fountain square, where the water seemed to fall more slowly, as if tired. Even the cats that prowled the alleyways moved with less certainty, pausing mid-step as though they had forgotten where they meant to go.
"Do you feel it, Papa?" Alina asked as they began their evening rounds. She pulled her shawl closer, though the night was not cold. Rashid paused before a lamp-post carved with verses in an ancient script. He touched the glass gently, almost apologetically, before lighting the wick inside. "I feel that something is changing," he said quietly. "The city is forgetting how to rest." It was true. Over the past moon cycle, Alina had heard whispers from neighbors and shopkeepers. People were waking exhausted, their dreams slipping away like water through cupped hands. Some could not recall dreaming at all. Others spoke of gray spaces, empty rooms, a feeling of wandering without destination. The tea-house keepers reported fewer morning customers, for people no longer woke refreshed and eager for company. The musicians in the evening gardens played to smaller crowds, as though the city had lost its taste for beauty before sleep. Alina's own dreams had grown thin and colorless, like fabric washed too many times. She who had once dreamed in vivid detail of gardens within gardens, of conversations with her grandmother who had passed 3 years before, of flying over the city with the nightingales, now woke remembering only shadows and silence. As they continued their walk, lighting lamp after lamp, Alina's hand drifted unconsciously to the small leather pouch at her belt. Inside were the 3 objects her grandmother had given her on her deathbed: the mirror no larger than her palm, its surface always slightly cool to the touch, the compass with its needle that never pointed quite north, and the cloak that could be folded so small it disappeared entirely, yet when unfurled seemed to gather twilight around the wearer. "These will know when you need them," her grandmother had whispered, her voice already far away. "They remember what others forget. Keep them close, little lamp keeper.
Your light will be needed in unexpected places." At the time, Alina had thought it simply the gentle ramblings of a beloved elder. But tonight, with the city's dreams fading like embers in rain, she wondered if her grandmother had seen something approaching, some slow tide that was only now reaching the shore. They finished their rounds near midnight, when the streets belonged to silence and starlight. Rashid touched his daughter's shoulder gently. "Sleep well if you can," he said. "Tomorrow I will speak with the other keepers. Perhaps they have noticed what we have noticed." Alina nodded and made her way to the small apartment above the lamp oil shop, where she had lived all her life. The rooms smelled of her father's work, brass polish and lemon oil, old paper, and the particular scent of flame-kissed glass. She prepared mint tea and sat by the window, looking out over the city she loved. Somewhere out there, dreams were disappearing. Somewhere, the gentle magic that had cradled Qamara for generations was unraveling thread by thread. Alina did not yet know why or how to mend it, but as she held her cooling tea and felt the weight of her grandmother's gifts against her side, she understood with quiet certainty that her own journey was beginning. She finished her tea slowly, savoring the warmth. Then she lay down beneath blankets that smelled of lavender and cedar, closed her eyes, and hoped that somewhere in the thinning dark, a dream might still be waiting to find her. The city breathed around her, soft and uncertain, and eventually, gently, sleep came. Morning arrived pale and hesitant, as though unsure of its welcome. Alina woke to the sound of her father moving quietly in the kitchen below, the familiar clink of the teapot against the stove, the soft shuffle of his morning rituals. She lay still for a moment, trying to catch hold of whatever dreams might have visited her in the night, but found only the faintest impression, something about a door, or perhaps a window, standing open in an empty room. She rose and dressed in her usual clothes, a simple tunic the color of dried roses, loose trousers, and the soft leather boots her father had made for her 2 winters ago. Over this she fastened her belt with its small pouch, feeling the slight weight of her grandmother's gifts settle against her hip. The gesture had become as automatic as breathing, yet today she felt oddly comforted by it, as though greeting old friends. Downstairs, Rashid had prepared breakfast, flat bread with honey, white cheese, and olives, along with strong tea fragrant with bergamot. They ate together in companionable quiet, the morning light filtering through windows that looked out onto the narrow street. Other lamp keepers would be gathering soon at the Hall of Wicks, the ancient meeting place where her family's guild had convened for as long as anyone could remember. "Will you come with me?" Rashid asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Alina shook her head gently. "I think I need to walk through the city today, to listen. Perhaps someone has noticed something that might help." Her father studied her with eyes that had watched over countless lamps and understood the nature of steady light. He nodded slowly. "Your grandmother would do the same. She always said that answers hide in plain sight, waiting for someone patient enough to notice them." After breakfast, Alina stepped out into streets that should have been bustling with morning energy. Instead, the city moved like someone half awake, going through the motions without quite remembering why. The bread seller arranged his loaves with mechanical precision, his usual cheerful greetings replaced by tired nods. Children walked to their lessons without the bright chatter that normally filled the lanes. Even the birds seemed quieter, as though they too had forgotten the full joy of morning song. Alina walked without specific destination, letting her feet choose the path. She found herself drawn toward the Garden of Inscriptions, a small park near the old quarter, where poets and scholars often gathered. The garden was famous for its stone benches, each carved with a different verse from Qamara's history. Love poems, philosophical musings, fragments of epic tales. People came here to read, to think, to find inspiration in words shaped by hands long turned to dust. Today, the garden held only one occupant, a figure seated beneath the ancient mulberry tree, writing in a journal with movements so slow and deliberate they might have been painting rather than writing. Alina recognized him, Faraz, a poet known throughout the city for verses that could make even the most practical merchant pause and consider beauty. He was younger than her father, but older than herself, with gray threading through his dark hair and ink stains permanently marked his fingers. She approached quietly, not wanting to disturb his work, but he looked up as though he had been expecting her. "Alina," he said, and his voice carried the particular weariness she had been hearing everywhere. "Daughter of the lamp keeper. Have you come seeking words or bringing them?" "Neither, I think," she replied, settling onto the bench across from him. "I came seeking understanding. The city feels different, doesn't it?" Faraz closed his journal carefully, marking his place with a dried flower. "Different," he repeated, as though tasting the word. "Yes, though I would say it feels less vivid, less alive, less itself." He gestured to the page before him. "I have been trying to write for 3 hours. I, who once could fill pages faster than my hand could move. Now the words come like travelers in deep snow, slow and labored, if they come at all." "When did you first notice?" Alina asked. "Perhaps a month ago. At first I thought it was merely the natural ebb of inspiration. All artists know such seasons. But this is different. It is as though the well I draw from has begun to run dry." He paused, looking at the trees overhead, their leaves rustling with a sound like whispered secrets. "I am not the only one. The musicians speak of melodies they can no longer quite hear. The painters complain that colors seem muted. And everywhere people wake tired, their dreams stolen in the night." Alina felt the pouch at her belt grow slightly warm, though perhaps she imagined it. "My grandmother used to say that dreams and creativity drink from the same spring, that they are siblings born of the same mystery." "Your grandmother was wise," Faraz said softly. "I miss her presence in the city. She understood things that others overlooked." He studied Alina with sudden interest. "She left you her tools, did she not? The mirror, the compass, the cloak?" "You know of them?" "I showed me the mirror once, years ago. I had written a poem I thought quite fine, but when I looked into that glass I saw it for what it truly was. Clever but hollow, made of borrowed phrases rather than genuine feeling. It was a difficult gift, that truth, but it made me a better poet." Alina drew the small mirror from her pouch, holding it in her palm.
Its surface caught the dappled light filtering through mulberry leaves, reflecting back not her face, but something else, a shimmer, a suggestion, like heat rising from sun-warmed stones. "Do you see anything in it now?" Faraz asked, leaning forward with the first genuine curiosity she had seen from anyone all morning. She looked more closely. The reflection shifted and steadied, showing not the garden where they sat, but another place entirely, or perhaps the same place seen differently. In the mirror's surface, the garden of inscriptions glowed with a soft luminescence, as though lit from within. The benches no longer merely bore carved verses, but pulsed gently with light, each word breathing. And in the center of the garden, where in the waking world there stood only grass and flowers, the mirror showed a pool of water dark as night sky, its surface perfectly still. "There is a pool, here, in this garden, but I have never seen it." Faraz arose, excitement cutting through his exhaustion. "Show me where."
Together, they walked to the center of the garden, to the spot where the mirror had shown water waiting. There was nothing there but earth and early autumn crocuses, their purple heads nodding in a breeze Alina could not feel. She knelt and brushed her hand across the ground. The soil felt different here, cooler, slightly damp, though it had not rained in days. "There is something beneath," she said, "something hidden." Faraz knelt beside her, and together they began to gently clear away the flowers and loose earth. After a few moments, Alina's fingers touched something smooth and cool, stone. They worked more carefully, revealing what lay below, a circular stone cover carved with the same ancient script that marked the oldest lampposts in the city. The words, she realized with a chill of recognition, were in her grandmother's handwriting, or rather in the handwriting of someone from her grandmother's line, someone who had carved these letters perhaps 100 years before. The inscription read, "For those who seek the source of dreams, first look into the mirror of truth, then follow the compass of longing, then wear the cloak of twilight. 3 keys for 3 thresholds. May your light never falter." Alina sat back on her heels, her heart beating steady and slow. This was meant for her, or rather for someone like her, a lampkeeper's descendant, carrying the old tools, arriving at the moment when dreams began to fade. "What will you do?" Faraz asked quietly. She looked at the stone cover, then at the mirror still resting in her palm, then up at the poet who watched her with tired but hopeful eyes. "I will follow where the mirror leads," she said simply. "Someone must tend to the dreams, just as my family tends to the lamps. Perhaps that is what we have always been doing, without quite knowing it." Faraz smiled, a small, gentle expression that nonetheless transformed his weary face. "Then I will write of this," he said, "so that if you do not return before evening, someone will know where you began." Alina rose, brushing earth from her knees. The autumn air wrapped around her like a soft embrace, and somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled the hour with a voice like memory. She had found the first threshold. Now she needed only the courage to cross it. But not yet, not quite yet. First, she would return home,
prepare properly, and wait for the kindness of evening, for lamp keepers, like dreams, do their best work in the gentle dark.
The afternoon passed in that peculiar way time has when one is preparing for a journey whose destination remains unknown. Alina returned home to find her father still away at the Hall of Wicks, and she was grateful for the solitude. She moved through the apartment, touching familiar things: the copper kettle that had been her mother's, the stack of lamp maintenance journals her father kept in meticulous order, the window seat where her grandmother had taught her to read by tracing words with oil-stained fingers. She prepared tea and sat with it, letting the warmth seep into her hands while her mind worked through what she knew. The mirror had revealed a hidden pool in the garden of inscriptions. The inscription spoke of 3 keys: mirror, compass, and cloak, and 3 thresholds. Her grandmother had known this would come, or at least had known it was possible. The dreams of Qamara were fading because something at their source had been disturbed or forgotten. From her pouch, she drew out the compass. It was smaller than a traveling compass, made of tarnished silver with a face of pale ivory. The needle inside was not iron, but something else. Bone, perhaps, or polished stone. Her grandmother had told her once that it pointed not to north, but to what the heart most needed to find, though Alina had never quite understood what that meant. She held it flat in her palm and watched. The needle swung lazily, almost reluctantly, before settling in a direction that pointed neither north nor south, but somewhere in between, toward the eastern quarter of the city, where the old mapmaker's shop stood tucked between a spice merchant and a cellar of singing birds. Alina knew the mapmaker slightly. His name was Yusuf, and he was ancient in the way that some people become ancient, not frail but refined, as though time had polished rather than eroded him. He created maps unlike any others, maps of emotions, maps of memories, maps that showed not where places were, but what they meant to those who loved them. Her father had once commissioned a map of their street as a gift for her grandmother, and Alina still had it, tucked away in a cedar box, a drawing that showed their home not as a building, but as a heart, with light radiating outward in precise golden lines. She finished her tea, left a note for her father explaining where she was going, and stepped back into the afternoon streets. The city remained subdued, caught in its strange exhaustion, but the light was beautiful, that particular amber quality that arrives in autumn when the sun remembers its journey toward winter and grows gentler in compensation. The walk to the eastern quarter took her through the textile district, where weavers sat at their looms creating carpets and shawls in patterns that had been passed down through centuries. Today, their fingers moved automatically, without the usual joy she had seen in their work. One weaver, an elderly woman named Soraya, who had taught Alina to recognize quality thread when she was a child, looked up as she passed. "Lamp keeper's daughter," Soraya called, her voice thin as silk. "Do you dream any more?" Alina admitted. "Barely," she admitted. "Do you?" "I used to dream in patterns," Soraya said, her hands never ceasing their work at the loom. "Designs would come to me in sleep, perfect and complete. I would wake and weave them into being. But now," she gestured at the carpet taking shape before her, "now I can only repeat what I already know. Nothing new comes. It is like weaving with a blindfold on." "I am trying to understand why, and perhaps how to mend it." Soraya's fingers paused just for a moment. "Are you? Then take this." She reached into a basket beside her loom and drew out a small spool of thread unlike any Alina had seen. It seemed to shift colors as it moved, blue flowing into silver, flowing into deep violet. Dream thread, Soraya explained. I wove it years ago, from spider silk gathered at dawn. I have been saving it, though I did not know for what. Perhaps for this.
Bring back the dreams, Soraya said simply, returning to her loom. Bring back the new patterns. We are tired of only remembering. The mapmaker's shop occupied a narrow building that leaned slightly to one side, as though listening to secrets told by the spice merchant next door. A sign above the entrance showed a compass rose with 8 points, each marked with a symbol Alina did not recognize. She pushed open the door and a bell chimed, not with sound but with scent, releasing a breath of cinnamon and old paper into the air. Inside, the shop was a wonder of organized chaos. Maps covered every surface, rolled and stacked, pinned to walls, spread across tables, hanging from the ceiling on fine chains so they swayed gently in the air currents. Some were drawn on parchment, others on silk or thin wood, or what appeared to be pressed leaves. The light that filtered through tall windows turned golden as it touched them, as though the maps themselves were made partly of sunshine. Yusuf sat at a broad desk near the back, bent over his work with a magnifying glass in one hand and a pen so fine it might have been made from a single hair. He did not look up as Alina entered, but he spoke nonetheless. "The lamp keeper's granddaughter," he said, his voice like rustling pages. "I have been expecting you, though I did not know when you would arrive." "The compass brought me here," Alina said, approaching his desk. "It pointed to you." "Of course it did." Now Yusuf looked up, and his eyes were the color of smoke and distant mountains. "I have something you need, or rather, I have been keeping something that was always meant for you." He set down his pen and magnifying glass with the care of someone for whom all objects are precious, then rose and moved to a cabinet so tall it nearly touched the ceiling. From a drawer high up, he withdrew a map case made of leather so old it had gone soft as cloth. He brought it to Alina and placed it in her hands. "Your grandmother gave this to me 20 years ago. She said that one day someone from her line would come seeking a map of the places between. She said I would know them by the compass they carried and by the question they were trying to answer." Alina opened the case carefully. Inside was a single map, drawn on silk so fine she could see her hand through it. The map showed Qamara, but not the Qamara she knew. This was the city beneath the city, or perhaps the city behind it, a place of layered shadows and hidden pools, of doorways that opened onto rooms that could not exist, of gardens that grew not upward toward the sun, but downward toward something else entirely. At the center of the map, marked with a small symbol of a lamp, was the Garden of Inscriptions, and beneath it, indicated by careful lines and notations in her grandmother's handwriting, was a pool, the same pool the mirror had shown her. From this pool, channels branched out like roots or veins, spreading throughout the city, feeding something that sustained the dreams of all who slept within Qamara's walls. "The well of first sleep," Yusuf said quietly, reading over her shoulder. "It is the source from which all dreams in this city spring. Your ancestors, the first lamp keepers, discovered it when Qamara was young. They understood that just as lamps need tending, so too does the boundary between waking and dreaming. For generations, your family has maintained both the visible lights and the invisible ones." "But I never knew," Alina whispered. "My father never told me." "Perhaps he did not know himself. Knowledge, like water, can sink beneath the surface over generations. Your grandmother was the last who truly understood. She tried to teach others, but he shrugged. We forget so easily what we do not practice daily. The well has been untended for 3 years since she passed, and now, as you have noticed, the dreams grow thin. Alina studied the map, tracing the lines with her finger. How do I reach it?
The stone cover you found will lift, but only at twilight, and only for those carrying the 3 keys. The mirror reveals what is hidden. The compass guides you to those who can help. And the cloak, he paused, choosing his words carefully. The cloak will allow you to pass between layers of the world, to walk in the threshold places where dream and waking overlap. And once I reach the well? That I cannot tell you. Your grandmother's instructions ended there. She said that what needed to be done would become clear to the one who arrived. She trusted that her descendants would carry not just her tools, but her understanding. Alina rolled the map carefully and returned it to its case. Outside the window, the afternoon was beginning its slow decline toward evening. Soon her father would be lighting the lamps, touching flame to wick throughout the city, maintaining one kind of boundary between dark and light, and she would be tending another, walking down into places her family had protected for generations without quite remembering why. "Thank you," she said to Yusuf, "for keeping this safe." The old mapmaker smiled, and for a moment he looked younger, or perhaps simply less tired. It is what we do, those of us who tend to hidden things. We remember on behalf of those who have forgotten. Go with care, lamp-keeper. The dream paths are gentle, but they are old, and old things sometimes grow strange in their solitude. Alina left the shop with the map case tucked carefully under her arm and the spool of dream thread in her pouch alongside her grandmother's gifts. The compass, when she checked it, now pointed back the way she had come, toward home, toward the garden of inscriptions, toward the threshold that would open with the coming of twilight. The sun was already painting the sky in shades of rose and amber, and somewhere across the city her father would be beginning his rounds. Alina walked slowly, breathing in the cooling air, feeling the weight of what she carried, not just objects, but responsibility, not just knowledge, but trust. Her grandmother had believed she would be ready when the time came. She hoped that belief had not been misplaced. The streets grew quieter as the light softened, and by the time Alina reached the garden of inscriptions, the first stars were appearing in a sky the color of lavender and smoke. Faraz was gone, but his journal lay on the bench where they had sat together, held open by a smooth stone. On the visible page he had written a single line in his careful script. She went down into the dreaming. May she return with light. Alina smiled, touched by his faith. Then she knelt beside the stone cover, which was now visible without needing to be uncovered, as though it had been waiting all day for twilight to make it real. She drew out the mirror, the compass, and finally, for the first time, the cloak. When she unfolded it, the fabric seemed to gather the evening around itself, becoming not quite invisible, but not quite present, a suggestion of cloth, a whisper of twilight made wearable. She placed it around her shoulders, and the world shifted gently, like a sigh. Everything became slightly more luminous, slightly more true. She could see the pool beneath the stone cover now, its surface dark and still, reflecting stars that were not quite the stars shining overhead. The stone cover lifted at her touch, weightless despite its size, and beneath it stairs descended into darkness that was not frightening but inviting, like the darkness of closed eyes just before sleep. Alina took one breath, then another. Then, with the mirror in one hand and the compass in the other, she began her descent into the well of first sleep.
The stairs were carved from stone that held a faint luminescence, as though moonlight had been mixed into the rock when the world was young. Alina descended slowly, one hand trailing along the smooth wall, feeling the coolness seep into her fingertips. The cloak around her shoulders moved with a life of its own, sometimes billowing gently, though there was no breeze, sometimes settling close, as though offering comfort. Behind her, the opening through which she had entered remained visible, a circle of deepening twilight, growing smaller with each step downward. She was not afraid, though perhaps she should have been. Instead, she felt the peculiar calm that comes when one finally understands the shape of a task that has been waiting all along. This descent felt inevitable, like water flowing downhill or autumn giving way to winter. Natural, right. The air changed as she went deeper. It grew neither warmer nor cooler, but seemed to become more textured, as though she were moving through layers of different qualities of darkness. Some parts felt silky, others substantial as velvet, still others light as breath. If she paused and listened carefully, she could hear something that might have been water moving far away, or wind through distant trees, or the collective exhalation of a sleeping city. After what might have been 100 steps, or 1,000, time moved strangely here, stretching and condensing like taffy. The stairs opened into a chamber. Alina stopped at the threshold, taking in what lay before her. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows that shifted and breathed like living things. The walls curved gently, organic rather than architectural, and they were covered in carvings so intricate that her eyes could not quite settle on them. The images seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. Scenes of daily life flowing into fantastic visions, flowing into geometric patterns, flowing back into recognizable forms. It was beautiful and slightly dizzying, and she had to look away after a moment, focusing instead on what occupied the center of the space, the well itself. It was both smaller and more profound than she had imagined, a circular pool perhaps 10 paces across, its water, if it was water, utterly still and black as the space between stars. The surface reflected nothing, not even the faint light that seemed to emanate from the walls. Around the pool's edge ran a border of silver, inscribed with words in a language Alina did not know, but somehow understood. They spoke of rest and renewal, of the garden where the soul goes when the body sleeps, of the source from which all dreams are drawn. But something was wrong. The pool should have been flowing, she realized, not in the way a fountain flows, but in some subtler fashion, a current, a circulation, a giving and receiving. Instead, it lay stagnant, and at its edge, barely visible in the uncertain light, something had grown, a tangle of what looked like briars or brambles, but made of shadow rather than wood, creeping across the silver border and reaching tendrils into the water itself.
Alina approached carefully, kneeling at the pool's edge at a place not yet touched by the dark growth. Up close, she could see that the water, she would call it water, though it seemed more substantial than water, denser somehow, had a slight film across its surface, like oil or dust. The channels her grandmother's map had shown, the veins that should have been carrying dreams throughout the city, were blocked, choked. She drew out the mirror and held it over the pool, hoping it might reveal what her eyes could not quite grasp. The mirror's surface rippled as though disturbed by wind, and then it showed her something that made her breath catch. In the mirror, she saw the pool as it had been, clear and vibrant, its surface covered with luminous lights like luminous water lilies. And she saw figures tending it, lamp keepers from generations past, including her grandmother as a much younger woman, moving around the pool's edge with tools Alina recognized. Oil cans, yes, but also small vessels for carrying water, brushes for cleaning the silver border, shears for trimming back growth. They worked with the same patient attention her father brought to the street lamps, the same reverence. The vision shifted, and Alina saw what had happened after her grandmother's passing. The pool, left untended, had begun to accumulate the natural sediment of dreams, the fears and sorrows that sink to the bottom of sleep, the forgotten nightmares and abandoned hopes that, in a healthy dreaming place, would be filtered and transformed and released. But without caretakers, these things had built up, layer upon layer, until they formed the dark growth she now saw strangling the well. The mirror showed her one more thing, herself, reflected not as she appeared, but as she needed to become. In the vision, she wore the cloak of twilight, yes, but she also carried a lamp, not one of the street lamps her father tended, but something smaller and more delicate, burning with a flame that seemed to come from within the lamp itself, rather than from any oil or wick. Alina lowered the mirror slowly. She understood now, at least partially. The well needed the same care as the street lamps. It needed tending, cleaning, the patient attention of someone who understood that light, whether in the waking world or the dreaming one, required maintenance and love. But she did not have the lamp the mirror had shown her. She looked down at her hands, at the tools she carried: mirror, compass, cloak, and the spool of dream thread Soraya had given her. Not enough, surely, to accomplish what generations of lamp keepers had done together. "You are thinking too much like the waking world," a voice said. Alina turned quickly. Standing at the edge of the chamber, where the stairs met the floor, was a figure she had not heard approach. At first, she thought it might be a statue that had detached itself from the wall. It had that quality of stillness, of patient endurance. But then it moved, stepping forward into the chamber's uncertain light, and Alina saw it was a woman, ancient beyond measure, her form somehow both solid and translucent. "Who are you?" Alina asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I am what remains of the first dream that was ever dreamed in Qamara," the woman said. Her voice was soft, layered, as though many people were speaking in gentle unison. "When your ancestors first discovered this well and understood its purpose, the city's collective dreaming created me, a guardian, a keeper of memory. I have been here since the beginning, watching, remembering, but I cannot tend the well myself. I am of it, not separate from it. It requires hands that belong to the waking world." She came closer, and Alina could see that her form was woven from the same substance as dreams, memory and feeling and image all tangled together, beautiful and sad and ancient. "Your grandmother was the last to visit regularly. She understood the work, had learned it from her grandmother, who learned it from hers. But she grew old and she could not make the descent anymore, and then she passed into the final sleep. She tried to teach your father, but he was too practical, too focused on the visible lamps. The knowledge would have felt like fantasy to him, so she did not press. Instead, she waited, hoping that someone else would carry the understanding. "And that's supposed to be me?" Alina said quietly. "You are here," the dream woman said simply. "That suggests something, does it not?" Alina looked back at the choked well, at the shadow briars creeping across the silver border. "I don't know how to do this. I don't have the tools. I don't have the knowledge." "You have what you need," the dream woman said, "but you are looking for it in the wrong way. In the waking world, a lamp requires oil and flame and glass, but here, in the threshold places, a lamp is simply light given form by intention. You carry the cloak that marks you as a walker between worlds. You carry the mirror that shows truth. You carry the compass that guides to what is needed. And you carry something else, something given freely by one who creates beauty. The dream thread." Alina touched the small spool in her pouch. "Thread connects, it binds and mends and creates patterns. In the dreaming, thread is not merely fiber, it is the substance of story, the line that connects one image to another, one feeling to the next. That thread was made by hands that understood beauty, given by a heart that longs for inspiration to return. It carries that intention, it carries that hope." Alina drew out the spool, and in the well chamber's strange light, the thread gleamed with colors that had no names. She held it carefully, feeling its warmth, its potential. "What must I do?" she asked.
"First, you must make your lamp," the dream woman said. "A lamp keeper's daughter should know how to call light. Trust what you were taught, even if you were taught in different words." Alina closed her eyes and thought of her father's patient lessons, how to prepare a lamp, clean the glass, trim the wick, pour the oil with care, never rushing, always attentive. The lamp's light came not from forcing flame, but from creating the right conditions, fuel, air, intention, all in balance. She held out her hands, cupped as though cradling something precious. She thought of light, not as fire or electricity, but as the thing itself, the essence of illumination. She thought of how it felt to walk the streets at twilight beside her father, touching flame to wick, bringing gentle brightness to the darkening city. She thought of the warmth of lamplight on a cold evening, the comfort of it, the safety. And between her palms, soft and steady, a light began to grow. It was small at first, no larger than a firefly's glow, but as she focused, not straining, simply attending, the way her father attended to each lamp, it strengthened and steadied until she held a sphere of light that pulsed gently with her breathing. It cast no harsh shadows, created no smoke or heat. It simply was, a small sun born from intention and care. "There," the dream woman said, and Alina could hear the smile in her layered voice. "A lamp keeper's daughter indeed. Now, the well needs cleansing, and then it needs connection. The shadow growth must be cut away, and the channels must be cleared. The dream thread will help you, but you must be willing to enter the water yourself. Are you afraid?" Alina looked at the dark pool, at its impenetrable surface. In the waking world, stepping into unknown water in an underground chamber would be foolish, possibly fatal. But here, wearing the cloak of twilight, carrying a lamp born of intention, she understood that different rules applied. "No," she said, and found it was true. "I'm not afraid." "Then go gently," the dream woman said. Remember that this is the source of all the city's dreams. Treat it with the same care you would treat a sleeping child, and know that I will be here, holding the memory of what you do, so that the next keeper, whoever they may be, will not have to discover this alone." Alina nodded. She set down the mirror and compass carefully at the pool's edge, keeping the thread and the lamp. Then, still wearing her cloak, she stepped into the well of first sleep. The water, if it was water, received her like a welcoming embrace. It was neither cold nor warm, but perfectly matched to her body's temperature, so that she could not quite tell where she ended and it began. Her feet found no bottom, yet she did not sink. Instead, she floated, suspended in darkness that was slowly becoming less dark as the lamp in her hands brightened in response to the well's presence. Around her, in the sphere of light the lamp created, Alina could see the threads of dreams, thousands upon thousands of them, delicate as spiderweb, connecting the well to every sleeping mind in Qamara. But many of them were tangled, knotted, coated in the residue of unprocessed fear and forgotten sorrow. The shadow briars she had seen from the edge were the physical manifestation of this, dreams gone stagnant, emotions gone sour, the natural debris of consciousness left to accumulate. She began with the closest tangle, carefully unwinding the threads using her fingers, sometimes using her teeth when the knots were too tight. It was slow work, patient work, exactly the kind of work her grandmother had taught her in other contexts, untangling thread for weaving, unknotting chains, solving puzzles through attention rather than force. As she worked, the lamp's light grew stronger, and she noticed something beautiful. Each thread she freed began to glow faintly with its own color, its own unique quality. Some were silver, others gold or deep blue or soft rose. They were not all bright, some were deliberately muted, the colors of gentle sadness or bittersweet memory, but each was clear, no longer choked or distorted. The work was meditative, timeless. Alina lost track of how long she floated there, tending the dreams of a city that slept above her. But gradually, thread by thread, tangle by tangle, the well began to clear. And in the clearing, in the patient unwinding, Alina found a peace she had not known she was seeking.
Time moved differently in the well. Or perhaps it did not move at all. Alina worked in a state that felt like meditation, each freed thread a small prayer, each untangled knot a quiet blessing. The lamp in her hands had become an extension of herself, its light responding to her breathing, brightening when she needed to see more clearly, softening when she needed gentleness. As she cleared the tangles nearest the surface, she began to sink deeper. Or perhaps the well was revealing more of itself, layer by layer, like a flower opening. The water grew denser, more substantial, until it felt less like liquid and more like the texture of sleep itself, that particular weight that settles over the body when consciousness finally releases its grip. Here, in the deeper places, the dreams were older. Some of the threads she found were ancient, perhaps dating back to the city's founding. They carried images she did not fully understand, figures in unfamiliar dress, buildings that no longer existed, celebrations of holidays long forgotten. But each thread still pulsed with life, with the hope or fear or joy that had created it. Alina treated them all with the same careful attention, regardless of their age or content. The shadow briars, she discovered, were not malicious. They were simply what happened when grief and fear were left unattended, allowed to grow dense and tangled without the processing that healthy dreaming provides. They had thorns, yes, and they clung stubbornly to the threads they had wrapped around, but they released when approached with patience rather than force. Alina found she could loosen them by humming softly, a wordless tune her grandmother had sung while working. The sound seemed to soothe the shadows, reminding them that they too had once been part of someone's story, worthy of acknowledgement rather than violence. As she worked deeper still, she came upon a place where the threads converged, a nexus point where the dreams of the entire city seemed to flow through before dispersing to individual sleepers. Here, the tangle was most severe, a great knot of shadow and light so complex that Alina's heart sank when she first saw it. It would take hours, perhaps days, to unwork such a snarl using only her fingers. This was when she remembered the dream thread. She drew it from her pouch, and the spool seemed to brighten in the well's darkness, its shifting colors more vivid than ever. The thread Soraya had woven from spider silk and morning dew and the longing for new patterns, it practically hummed with potential, eager to be used. "Whisker," she asked of it. "Show me how to mend what is broken." The thread responded by unspooling itself, a length of it drifting from the spool like a living thing, curious and intelligent. It wove itself toward the great knot, and where it touched the tangled dreams, something remarkable happened. The knot began to loosen, not because the thread was cutting or forcing, but because it was showing the other threads how to move, how to find their way free. It was leading by example, demonstrating patterns of flow and release. Alina understood then what she needed to do. She began to weave the dream thread through the nexus, not to replace the existing threads, but to support them, to create a structure that would hold everything in right relationship. Her hands moved with a certainty that came not from her own knowledge, but from somewhere deeper, from generations of lamp keepers who had done similar work, from her grandmother's patient teachings, from the muscle memory of every time she had helped her father maintain a lamp or watched Soraya work at her loom. She wove patterns of connection and patterns of release. She created channels where dreams could flow freely and pools where they could rest when needed. She made sure that joy had pathways to reach those who needed it, that sorrow had places to be processed and transformed, that fear could be met with courage and loneliness with comfort. The work was intricate and demanding, but it was also deeply satisfying. She could feel the well responding, beginning to circulate again, the stagnant places stirring to life. The shadow briars, finding no more purchase on threads that were properly flowing, began to dissolve, not disappearing entirely, but transforming into something lighter, perhaps into the dark that is necessary for dreams, the shadow that gives light its meaning. As the nexus cleared and the weaving took hold, Alina became aware of something she had not noticed before: voices. Or not quite voices, presences. The dreams themselves were aware, in some fashion. Each thread carried with it a trace of the person who had dreamed it, and now, as they were freed and reconnected, those traces were singing. It was not sound exactly, but she experienced it as music, a vast, gentle chorus of sleeping minds gratefully returning to their proper rhythms. She heard children dreaming of play, of laughter, of the simple joys of discovery. She heard elders dreaming of memories, revisiting the faces of those long gone with bittersweet tenderness. She heard lovers dreaming of connection, artists dreaming of creation, scholars dreaming of understanding, and beneath it all, she heard the city itself dreaming its own slow dream, the collective unconscious of Qamara, ancient and patient and wise. The lamp she held began to change. It was no longer something she carried, but something that existed between her hands and the well, a bridge of light connecting her waking consciousness to the dreaming waters. And she realized that this was what her ancestors had created, not just a source of dreams, but a relationship, a tending, a constant gentle conversation between the city that woke and the city that slept. "You are doing well," the dream woman's voice came to her, though Alina could not see her form in the depths. "The well is clearing, the dreams are returning to their proper flow, but there is one more thing you must do, lamp keeper's daughter. You must anchor the weaving so that it will hold even when you are not here." "How?" Alina asked, her voice strange in the dense medium of the well. "With intention and with promise. Your grandmother anchored it with a vow that she would tend this place as faithfully as she tended the street lamps. You must make your own vow, in your own words. The well will hear you and remember." Alina floated in the clearing waters, the lamp bright between her hands, the dream thread woven through the nexus like veins of color through marble. She thought about promises and responsibility, about the work of tending invisible things that nonetheless sustained everyone who depended on them. She thought about her father walking the streets each evening, faithful and patient, bringing light to the darkness. She thought about Soraya at her loom, Faraz with his poetry, Yusuf with his maps, all of them tending their own forms of beauty, creating structures that helped others navigate the world. She thought about her grandmother, who had carried this knowledge quietly, who had prepared these tools and left them for someone she would never see complete the work. And she knew what vow she needed to make. "I promise," Alina said, her words rippling through the well like light through water, "that I will tend the dreams of Qamara as my family has tended its lamps. I will come here when needed, to clear what has become tangled, to mend what has frayed, to ensure that the boundary between waking and sleeping remains gentle and kind. I will do this not for glory or recognition, but because it is work that matters, because dreams matter, because the invisible things we tend are often the most essential. This I vow, by the lamp I carry and the light I've been taught to keep." The well responded. The water around her brightened, and she felt the dream threads she had woven lock into place, not rigidly, but with the flexible strength of healthy growth. The nexus became a living pattern, capable of processing the natural flow of dreams, of transforming fear into courage and sorrow into wisdom, of allowing joy to circulate freely and wonder to bloom where it was needed. The lamp between her hands pulsed once, twice, 3 times, like a heart beating, like a promise accepted. And then, gently, the well began to lift her upward. Alina did not resist. She kept the lamp kindled and held the now empty spool of dream thread, empty but not depleted, for the thread had become part of the weaving, part of the well itself. As she rose through the layers of darkness and dream, she saw the channels opening, saw the light beginning to flow through the pathways her grandmother's map had shown, spreading throughout the city like roots drawing water from deep earth. She saw individual dreams brightening as the flow restored them, a baker dreaming of bread that rose into the shapes of clouds, a teacher dreaming of students discovering answers they didn't know they had been seeking, a mother dreaming of her children grown and happy and safe, small dreams and vast ones, simple and complex, all of them connected,
all of them sustained by the well she had just restored.
When she broke the surface, it was not into the chamber where she had entered, but into somewhere else, a threshold space between the well and the waking world. The dream woman stood waiting, and her form seemed more solid now, more clearly defined. "Thank you," the dream woman said, and her layered voice carried genuine warmth. "The city will sleep better tonight than it has in 3 years, and you have given me hope that this work will continue, that the well will not be forgotten again." "I will teach someone else," Alina promised. "When the time comes, I won't let the knowledge sink beneath the surface again." "That is wise," the dream woman said. "But for now, you must rest. You have worked hard, and even lamp keepers need sleep." She gestured, and Alina saw a path opening, not stairs, but something gentler, a gradual slope of light leading upward toward the waking world. The lamp in her hands had grown smaller, more portable, settling into a form she could carry. It was no longer an active working tool, but a reminder, a symbol of the work she had done and the work she would continue to do. "Will I see you again?" Alina asked. "Every time you tend the well," the dream woman said. "I am always here, keeping the memory of this place, holding the story of what it means. Go now. Your father will be wondering where you are, and the city is beginning to dream again." Alina nodded her thanks and began walking up the path of light. With each step, the well chamber grew more distant, and the sounds of the waking world grew closer, night birds calling, wind through leaves, the distant murmur of the city settling into evening. When she emerged, it was full night. She stood in the garden of inscriptions beneath a sky thick with stars, the stone cover of the well closing gently behind her, as though it had never been open. The cloak around her shoulders had returned to looking like ordinary fabric, though it still held a faint shimmer when the starlight caught it right. The lamp she carried was now a small lantern, simple and elegant, burning with a flame that seemed to need no oil. Faraz was there, sitting on the bench where she had first spoken with him, though now his journal was closed and he was simply watching the stars. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You came back," he said, and his voice held none of the exhaustion she had heard that morning. He sounded clear, awake, alive. "I came back," Alina agreed. "I dreamed," he said wonderingly. "Just now, sitting here, I closed my eyes for what I thought was a moment, and I dreamed. I saw a garden made entirely of words, and they were growing like flowers, blooming into poems I had never written. When I woke, I remembered every line." He held up his journal, and even in the starlight, Alina could see fresh writing covering the page. "It's been so long since inspiration came like this, like breathing, like grace." Alina smiled. "The dreams are flowing again," she said simply. "The source is clear." Around them, the city was settling into sleep. In windows throughout Qamara, lights were dimming as people surrendered to rest, and tonight, for the first time in years, they would sleep deeply, they would dream vividly, they would wake refreshed, with poems half-remembered on their lips and solutions to problems that had troubled them for years. Alina knew she should go home, should find her father and ease whatever worry her absence had caused, but for just a moment she stood in the garden and breathed in the night air, feeling the satisfaction of work well done, of invisible things tended with care. Tomorrow she would begin teaching herself to return to the well regularly, to establish the rhythms of tending that would keep the dreams flowing. Tomorrow she would think about who might learn this work alongside her so that the knowledge would not be lost again. But tonight she would simply rest in the knowledge that the city was dreaming and that the dreams were beautiful.
Alina walked home through streets that seemed softer somehow, as though the city itself had relaxed into a deeper state of peace. The stars overhead were brilliant, and the moon, 3 days past full, cast gentle shadows that no longer felt heavy with the accumulated weariness she had noticed before. Even the night air tasted different, cleaner, like the first breath after a long-held sigh. Her father's lamp shop was dark when she arrived, but a single light burned in the upstairs window, the small reading lamp he kept by his favorite chair. Alina climbed the stairs quietly, not wanting to startle him, and found Rashid exactly where she expected, sitting with a book open in his lap, though his eyes were closed and his breathing had the slow, steady rhythm of sleep. She stood in the doorway watching him for a moment. His face, usually marked with the subtle tension of someone carrying unspoken concerns, had smoothed into an expression of deep rest. And unless she was imagining it, the corners of his mouth were turned slightly upward, as though whatever he was dreaming pleased him. Alina set down her small lantern, the one born from the well, on the table beside him. Its flame cast a warm glow that seemed to embrace rather than intrude. Then she gently removed the book from his lap, marked his place with a ribbon, and draped a blanket over his shoulders. He stirred slightly but did not wake, only settled more deeply into his chair with a soft exhalation. She prepared herself for bed in her own small room, washing her face in the basin, changing into her nightclothes, brushing out her hair. Everything felt both ordinary and transformed, as though she were performing familiar rituals for the first time, or perhaps remembering them after a long absence. The mirror above her dresser caught her reflection, and she paused, studying her own face. She looked the same dark eyes, same scatter of freckles across her nose, same slight asymmetry to her smile, but there was something different in her expression, a quality she could not quite name. Settledness, perhaps, or purpose. The look of someone who has discovered what work they were meant for and has begun doing it. Before sleeping, she checked the 3 tools her grandmother had given her. The mirror she placed on her nightstand, where it could catch the first light of morning. The compass she set beside it, its needle now spinning slowly rather than pointing in any particular direction, perhaps because, for the moment, she was exactly where she needed to be, and the cloak she folded carefully and placed in the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, where it rested among other precious things: her mother's silver comb, her grandmother's journals, a letter her father had written to her when she was born, but had been too shy to give her until she turned 16. Then Alina lay down in her narrow bed, pulled the blankets up to her chin, and closed her eyes. She expected to fall asleep immediately, exhausted from the work in the well, but sleep came gradually instead, gently, like a friend taking her hand and leading her somewhere safe. And when the dreams arrived, they were vivid and clear and full of color, more real in some ways than waking life had ever been. She dreamed of the well, but not as it had been when she first descended. She dreamed of it as it now was, clear and flowing, the nexus she had woven glowing softly at its center, threads of light radiating outward to touch every sleeping mind in Qamara. She dreamed of the dream woman who smiled at her with ancient kindness and said, "Welcome home, lamp keeper. You belong to both worlds now." And she dreamed of her grandmother, young and vibrant, standing beside the well with a lamp in her hands, showing Alina patterns she would need to know, teaching her the old songs that made the shadow briars loosen their grip, demonstrating the proper way to weave dream thread so that it would hold for generations. When Alina woke, dawn was painting her window in shades of pearl and rose. She lay still for a moment, holding on to the dreams, letting them settle into memory where they would remain clear and accessible. Then she rose, dressed, and went downstairs to find her father already awake and making breakfast. Rashid looked up as she entered the kitchen, and his smile was brighter than she had seen in months. "Good morning," he said. "I had the most remarkable dream last night. I dreamed of your mother, may her memory be a blessing, and she was teaching me to dance. I haven't dreamed of her in years, not clearly like that. It was a gift." Alina embraced him, feeling the simple joy of knowing that her work had returned this gift to him, to all the city. "I'm glad," she said softly.
"I fell asleep in my chair," Rashid continued, releasing her and returning to the tea he was brewing. "I don't even remember closing my eyes. One moment I was reading, the next I was waking to birdsong with a blanket I don't remember putting there, and a feeling of such peace. Did you cover me?" "I did," Alina said. "You looked like you needed the rest." "We all needed rest," Rashid said, pouring tea for them both. "But something has changed. I can feel it. The other lamp keepers reported the same thing this morning. They all slept deeply for the first time in ages. Several of them spoke of dreams so vivid they woke weeping with joy." He looked at his daughter with curiosity in his eyes. "Do you know anything about this?" Alina took the cup of tea he offered, breathing in its fragrance, mint and lemon balm, her father's favorite blend. She had a choice to make. She could tell him everything, explain about the well and the work she had done, or she could keep it quiet, carry the knowledge alone as her grandmother had done. But she had promised herself that the knowledge would not sink beneath the surface again, and her father, practical though he was, deserved to know that his work with the visible lamps was part of a larger tending, a deeper care. "I know something about it," she said carefully. "May I show you something after breakfast?" They ate together in comfortable silence, sharing flatbread with honey and soft cheese, dried figs and almonds. Rashid told her about the lamp keepers' meeting, about the plans they were making to restore some of the older lamp posts that had fallen into disrepair. Alina told him about visiting Yusuf, the mapmaker, and speaking with Faraz in the garden. When they had finished eating and the dishes were washed and put away, Alina led her father to her room and brought out her grandmother's map from its case. She spread it on her bed, and Rashid leaned over it, his eyes widening as he recognized his mother's handwriting, the careful notations, the drawing of a city beneath the city. "What is this?" he asked quietly. "It's grandmother's map of the dream-tending places," Alina said. "She gave it to Yusuf to keep for me for when I would need it." She told him everything then, about the fading dreams, about the mirror revealing the hidden cool, about the descent into the well and the work she had done there. She showed him the small lantern that had come back with her from the threshold places, still burning with its gentle flame. She explained about the dream threads and the shadow briars, about the dream woman who kept the memory of the well, about the vow she had made. Rashid listened without interrupting, his hands resting on the map, as though drawing strength from his mother's familiar writing. When Alina finished, he was quiet for a long moment, looking not at her but at the map, tracing its lines with one finger. "She tried to tell me once," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Your grandmother. When I was young, maybe 20 years old, she tried to explain, but there was more to our work than maintaining street lamps. But I was practical, skeptical. I thought she was speaking in metaphors or perhaps growing confused in her age. I dismissed it, kindly but firmly, and after that she never mentioned it again." He looked up at Alina and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I failed to receive what she was trying to give me. But you understood. You were ready in a way I never was." "You tend the visible lamps," Alina said gently. "That work is just as important. Without the lights you maintain, the city would stumble in darkness. My work is simply adjacent to yours, different but connected." "May I see the well?" Rashid asked. "Not to tend it, I understand that work is yours, but simply to see, to know that my mother's work and now your work is real and has a place in the world." "I considered this. The well was not forbidden to others, but it revealed itself only to those who carried the right tools, who approached with the right intention. Still, he was her father, and his desire came from respect rather than curiosity, from a need to understand rather than to control. "Tonight," she said, "when we do the evening lamp rounds, I'll take you to the garden and show you what the mirror shows. The well won't open for you, you don't carry the cloak, but you'll be able to see enough to understand."
Rashid nodded, satisfied with this. He rolled the map carefully and returned it to its case. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said. "And thank you for doing what I could not. Your grandmother would be proud." The day passed in a curious blend of ordinary and extraordinary. Alina helped her father in the shop, cleaning lamp glass and filling oil cans, greeting the customers who came to purchase wicks or report a broken street lamp. But now she saw the work differently, understanding it as part of a larger pattern of tending, of maintaining boundaries between light and dark, between waking and sleeping, between chaos and gentle order. Around midday, Soraya, the weaver, came to the shop, moving with more energy than Alina had seen from her in weeks. "Lamp keeper's daughter," she said, her eyes bright. "Last night, I dreamed in patterns again, complex, beautiful patterns I've never seen before. I woke and went directly to my loom, and I've been weaving ever since. Look." She unfolded a small piece of cloth she had brought with her, a sample of work in progress. The pattern was indeed unlike anything Alina had seen, geometric yet organic, precise yet flowing, in colors that seemed to shift depending on how the light caught them. "It's beautiful," Alina said honestly. "It's a dream made real," Soraya said. "I have you to thank, don't I? Somehow. I don't understand what you did, but I felt the change last night, like a dam breaking and water flowing free again. Whatever you did, thank you." She pressed the cloth sample into Alina's hands, a gift freely given, and left with a lightness in her step that made her seem decades younger. Similar visits marked the afternoon. Faraz came by to share 3 new poems, written in a single sitting, each one polished and complete, as though given whole rather than constructed word by word.
A painter Alina knew slightly stopped to report that she had dreamed in colors that didn't exist in waking life, and was now trying to mix pigments that might capture even a shadow of what she had seen. A musician spoke of melodies that had come to him in sleep, complex and haunting and perfectly formed. The city, it seemed, was waking from more than sleep. It was waking into a renewed creativity, a restored connection to the deep well, both literal and metaphorical, from which inspiration springs. As the afternoon faded toward evening, and it came time for the lamp rounds, Rashid and Alina walked together through streets that felt alive with possibility. People called greetings to them with more warmth than usual, as though some collective mood had lifted, some shared burden had eased. Children played with more enthusiasm, shopkeepers chatted with more animation, even the cats seemed more purposeful in their prowling. When they reached the Garden of Inscriptions, the sun was just touching the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and copper and deep rose. Alina led her father to the center of the garden, to the place where the stone cover lay hidden beneath grass and flowers. She drew out the mirror and held it over the spot. Immediately it showed what lay beneath, the pool with its dark, now clear water, the silver border gleaming, the threads of light radiating outward. Rashid drew in a sharp breath. "It's real," he whispered. "It's actually real." "It's real," Alina confirmed, "and it needs tending, the same way the lamps need tending. Different tools, different methods, but the same patient care." They stood together in the gathering twilight, father and daughter, lamp keepers both, looking at the mirror's revelation of the city's hidden heart. "I will help you however I can. Even if I cannot descend into the well myself, I can keep watch while you work. I can help you remember to make time for this tending. I can carry the knowledge with you, so you're not alone in it." "Thank you," Alina said softly. They completed their lamp rounds together, lighting each street lamp with the same steady care they always had, but now with the added understanding that they were tending multiple forms of light, maintaining multiple boundaries. As each lamp flared to life, Alina thought of the dream threads she had woven, thought of the nexus at the well's heart pulsing with gentle radiance, thought of the invisible work that sustained the visible world. As the last lamp was lit and the stars were beginning to appear, they walked together home through a city settling peacefully into night, a city that would, tonight and every night hence, dream deeply and wake restored. And Alina felt for the first time in her life completely at home in her purpose. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. By day, Alina helped her father maintain the street lamps and served customers in the shop. By night, every third evening, she descended into the well to tend the dream threads, clearing small tangles before they could grow into larger blockages, ensuring the flow remained steady and clear. The work became meditative, a kind of prayer offered in darkness and silence. The city continued to flourish in ways both subtle and obvious. The morning markets grew louder with conversation and laughter. The musicians in the evening gardens played to crowds so large that people sat on the cobblestones when the benches filled. The painters' quarter became vibrant with new works hung to dry in windows. Even the children seemed more imaginative in their play, acting out elaborate stories that came from dreams half-remembered. Alina had begun keeping a journal, following her grandmother's example. In it, she recorded the patterns she observed in the well, which dream threads seemed most prone to tangling, what times of month required more careful tending, which seasons brought different qualities of sleep to the city. She wrote down the songs that soothed the shadow briars and sketched the weaving patterns that kept the nexus strong. This knowledge, she was determined, would not be lost again. On a crisp autumn morning, as Alina was arranging lamp wicks in the shop window, the compass in her pouch grew warm against her hip. She paused, setting down the box of wicks, and drew it out. The needle was spinning slowly, then stopped, pointing toward the southern district, a part of the city she rarely visited, where the streets grew narrow and turned on themselves like a labyrinth. She had learned to trust the compass, just as it had led her to Yusuf the map-maker when she needed the map. It now suggested there was something in the southern district that required her attention, or perhaps someone who needed to be part of this story. "Papa?" she called toward the back room where Rashid was refilling oil cans. "I need to follow the compass for a while. Will you be all right here?" "Of course," came her reply. "Take your time, and be careful, those southern streets can be confusing." Alina gathered her pouch with its tools, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the autumn chill, and set out following the compass's guidance. The device led her through familiar territory at first, past the fountain square, through the spice market with its fragrant air, beyond the musician's quarter where someone was practicing a melancholy melody on a ney flute. But then the streets began to narrow and twist. The buildings here were older, their stones darker with age, their windows smaller and set with thick glass that distorted the light. The people she passed moved with purpose but without hurry, as though time worked differently in this part of the city. There were shops she had never heard of, a seller of keys that opened nothing in the waking world, a dealer in preserved silence, a vendor of shadows cast by people who had never existed. The compass led her to a shop tucked into a corner where two streets met at an odd angle. The building leaned slightly, and its door was painted a blue so deep it was almost black. Above the entrance, a sign declared in silver letters, "Keeper of what was forgotten, memories tended and restored." Alina paused at the threshold, studying the sign. A merchant of forgotten memories. She had heard rumors of such a person, whispered stories in the marketplace about someone who could help people recover lost recollections, who dealt in the currency of what had been overlooked or dismissed. But she had never been certain whether such a merchant was real or merely a story people told. The compass needle pointed directly at the door, unwavering. She pushed it open, and a bell chimed, this one making a sound like rain on glass, delicate and precise. The interior was dimly lit, illuminated by lamps that burned with flames in unusual colors, pale green, soft violet, warm amber. The walls were lined with shelves, and on these shelves were vessels of every kind, bottles and jars and boxes and small chests, each labeled in careful script. Alina stepped closer to read some of the labels. First day of school, girl aged 6. Grandmother's lullaby, boy aged 3. The taste of mother's cooking, various ages. Face of childhood friend, name forgotten. Each container held someone's lost memory, preserved and waiting. "Welcome, lamp-keeper's daughter," a voice said from the back of the shop. The merchant emerged from behind a curtain of hanging crystals that chimed softly as he passed through them. He was neither young nor old, with features that seemed to shift slightly when Alina wasn't looking at him directly, as though he existed somewhat between states, like the twilight he apparently inhabited. His eyes were kind but knowing, the eyes of someone who had seen into the private corners of many hearts. "You know who I am?" Alina asked.
"I know what you are," he corrected gently. "A tender of dreams, a walker between worlds, a keeper of the boundary between sleeping and waking,
and I know that your compass led you here, which means there is something I can offer you, or something you can offer me. The compass always knows." He gestured to a small table near the window, set with 2 chairs and a copper pot of tea that was somehow already steaming. They sat, and he poured for them both, the tea releasing The memory shifted. Now the grandmother was older, perhaps 60, and she was speaking to someone Alina could not see, perhaps to herself, perhaps to the future keeper she hoped would come. She was sitting beside the well, the lamp in her hands, and her voice was gentle but firm. "To the one who comes after me," she said, "know that you are not alone in this work. The dream woman will guide you, the well will teach you, and the tools I have left will serve you well. But know also that the work of tending dreams is not separate from the work of living well in the waking world. Every kindness you offer, every beauty you create, every truth you speak, these things strengthen the dreams. We are weavers, we keepers, stitching the sleeping world and the waking world together with threads of care and attention." She paused, looking into the lamp's flame. "I wish I could be there to teach you in person, to walk beside you as you learn, but perhaps this is better. Perhaps each keeper must find their own relationship with the well, must learn in their own time what it means to tend invisible things. Trust yourself, trust the work, and remember that you are loved by me and by all those who came before." The memory faded gently, and Alina found herself back in Kareem's shop, tears streaming down her face. She had not just heard her grandmother's words, she had felt her grandmother's love, her confidence, her deep trust that the work would continue. It was a gift more precious than any object could be. Kareem handed her a cloth for her tears, waiting patiently while she composed herself. When she could speak, her voice was rough but steady. "Thank you for keeping this safe, for giving it to me at the right time." "It is what I do," Kareem said simply. "Memories are delicate things. They need tending too, preservation and care, so they can be returned when they will do the most good." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Your grandmother was wise to know that words spoken in grief might not be heard clearly, but a memory experienced in calm, that stays." Alina carefully closed the silver box and held it against her heart. "You said there were 3 memories?" "3, Kareem confirmed. "The second will be ready when you need it. I will know the time. And the third," he smiled mysteriously, "the third is for a moment that has not yet arrived, but it will. The well has its rhythms, and your journey with it is not yet complete." They finished their tea in companionable silence. Before Alina left, Kareem gave her a small card with his shop's address written in silver ink. "Come back whenever you need," he said. "The southern district can be confusing, but the card will guide you. And if you ever need me to preserve something precious, something you fear might be lost to time or sorrow, I am here." Alina tucked the card into her pouch alongside her other tools. As she stepped back into the narrow street, she felt both lighter and more grounded. Lighter because she had received her grandmother's blessing so directly. More grounded because she understood more fully the continuity of the work she had undertaken. The compass, when she checked it, was no longer warm. Its needles spun freely, having delivered her where she needed to be. She walked home slowly, letting the memory settle into her bones,
joining the other knowledge she carried. The southern district released her gradually, the twisting streets unfolding until she found herself in familiar territory once more. When she arrived at the lamp shop, her father took one look at her face and simply opened his arms. She stepped into his embrace and let herself be held, the way she had been held as a child, the way she would hold others when her turn came to be the elder, the keeper of memory and light. "She knew," Alina whispered against her father's shoulder. "She knew I would come. She trusted me before I knew there was anything to trust." "That's what grandmothers do," Rashid said softly. "They see futures we cannot yet imagine, and they love us into them." That evening, when Alina descended into the well for her tending, she felt her grandmother's presence more strongly than ever before, not as a ghost or spirit, but as the love that had been woven into the very structure of the place, into the silver border of the pool, into the patterns of the dream threads, into the careful balance that generations of keepers had maintained. She worked with gratitude rather than duty, with joy rather than obligation, and the dreams that flowed through the well that night were especially sweet, touched with the particular quality of light that comes from love remembered and honored. Far above, in the sleeping city, people smiled in their rest.
Winter arrived gently in Qamara, bringing with it the soft rains that made the streets gleam like polished stone and filled the air with the scent of wet earth and distant mountains. The lamp rounds took longer in winter, as Rashid and Alina worked carefully to keep the glass clean and the flames protected from the wind. But there was a coziness to the work, a satisfaction in bringing warmth and light to the early darkness. Alina had settled into her dual role with a grace that surprised her. By day, she was the lamp keeper's daughter, tending the shop and the street lamps, greeting neighbors and maintaining the visible infrastructure of light. But night, every third evening, she was the dream keeper, descending into the well to ensure that the invisible infrastructure of rest and inspiration remained clear and flowing. The city had transformed in the months since she had restored the well. Artists spoke of a renaissance, a flowering of creativity unlike anything in living memory. The Weavers' Guild had commissioned Soraya to teach a new generation of apprentices, passing on not just techniques, but the understanding that patterns could be received as gifts from the dreaming mind. Faraz had published a collection of poems that was being read throughout the region, verses that seemed to touch something deep in everyone who encountered them. Even the children's games had grown more elaborate, their imaginations fed by vivid dreams. But Alina had also noticed something else, a subtle pattern in the dream threads she tended. Once every lunar month, around the time of the new moon, a particular set of threads would glow more brightly than others, pulsing with a rhythm that felt like breath or heartbeat. These threads connected to specific dreamers scattered throughout the city, and though Alina did not know their identities, she sensed that they were important somehow, connected to the well's deeper purpose. She had mentioned this to the dream woman during one of her tendings, and the ancient guardian had smiled her layered smile. "You are noticing what your grandmother noticed," she had said. "There are some in every generation who dream more deeply, who touch the well more directly. They are not better or more important than other dreamers, but they are attuned, connected. When the time is right, they will understand their role." "What role?" Alina had asked. "That is for them to discover," the dream woman had replied, "just as you discovered yours. The well does not command, it invites, it offers. Those who are meant to answer will answer." Now, on a cold evening just after the winter solstice, Alina stood in the garden of inscriptions preparing for her descent into the well. The garden was beautiful in winter, bare branches etched against a sky of deep blue, frost glittering on the stone benches, the verses carved into them somehow more poignant in the season of rest and waiting. She was not alone. Her father stood nearby, keeping watch as he always did when she descended, and with him were 3 others, Faraz the poet, Soraya the weaver, and a young woman Alina had not expected, Layla, the daughter of the baker, who could not have been more than 16. "The compass led me here," Layla said shyly when she saw Alina's surprise. "I woke this morning in my hand, though I have no memory of how it came to me, and when I held it, it pointed here, to this garden at this hour." Alina looked at her pouch and found it lighter. The compass was gone, or rather, it had traveled to find the next person who needed it. She felt a flutter of something between loss and recognition. The tools her grandmother had given her were not meant to be hoarded, but shared, passed along when they were needed elsewhere. "Tell me about your dreams," Alina said gently to Layla. The girl's face lit up. Alina nodded slowly, understanding. "And do you ever dream of a pool, dark water, very still, with threads of light radiating from it?" Layla's eyes widened. "Yes, often. I thought it was just my imagination." "It's not imagination," Alina said, "or rather, it's more than imagination. You're touching the well of first sleep, the source of all dreams in this city. Some people have that gift, the ability to dream deeply enough to sense the source." She turned to Soraya and Faraz. "And you both? Did something bring you here tonight?" Soraya withdrew from her bag a piece of cloth she had been weaving, the same pattern Alina had seen months ago, but now completed into a full tapestry. In its center was an image of the well, rendered in thread with such precision that Alina gasped. Every detail was perfect: the silver border, the nexus of woven light, even the dream woman standing at the water's edge. "I have been weaving this for months, not from any design I consciously made, but from dreams that came night after night. Each morning I would remember a little more, add a little more thread. Now it's finished, and I knew, somehow I knew, that it needed to come here, to this garden, tonight." Faraz held up his journal. "I've been writing a poem, an epic, actually, the story of the lamp keepers of Qamara and their secret work tending the dreams of the city. I've never written anything so long or so complex. The verses come to me complete, as though someone is reciting them from memory. I'm on the 100th canto, and I knew that tonight I needed to be here." Alina felt something shifting, a pattern emerging that she could almost but not quite grasp. The compass had found Layla, Soraya had woven the well, Faraz had written its story, and they had all been called here on this night, the longest night of the year, when darkness held the world most completely before turning back toward light. "Will you come with me?" Alina asked them.
into the well? I don't know what will happen, but I think this is why the dream threads have been glowing. You are the deeply attuned dreamers, and perhaps it's time for the well to have more than one keeper." The three looked at each other, then at Rashid, who smiled encouragingly. "I'll keep watch here. Take all the time you need." Alina drew out the mirror and the cloak, her two remaining tools from her grandmother. She held the cloak open, and it expanded, growing larger than should have been possible, until it could wrap around all four of them. When the twilight fabric settled over their shoulders, binding them together, the world shifted into that liminal space where the hidden becomes visible. The stone cover of the well lifted at Alina's touch, and together, connected by the cloak, the four of them descended the luminous stairs. The descent felt different with others beside her. Their breathing synchronized, their heartbeats found a common rhythm, and by the time they reached the dream chamber, they moved as one body with four parts, each necessary, each contributing their own strength. The dream woman was waiting, and her form seemed more solid than Alina had ever seen her, as though the presence of multiple keepers gave her greater substance. "Welcome," she said, and her layered voice now sounded like a chorus. "The lamp keeper's daughter has done well. She has restored the flow, established the tending, and now she brings others to share the work. This is as it should be. The well was never meant to be tended by one alone." She gestured to the pool, and Alina saw that around its edge, at the four cardinal points, there now appeared four small alcoves she had never noticed before. In each alcove rested a tool, a spindle for thread, a pen.
Soraya moved to the alcove with the spindle, and when she touched it, it glowed with recognition. Faraz approached the pen, and it seemed to leap into his hand. Layla, drawn to the vessel, lifted it carefully, finding it filled with water that sparkled like starlight, and Alina's lamp, the one she had created from intention months ago, settled into the fourth alcove, as though it had always belonged there. "What do we do?" Layla asked, her voice hushed with wonder. The dream woman smiled. "What you have always done, but now together, consciously. The weaver maintains the patterns, ensuring the dream threads remain properly woven. The poet helps shape the stories, the narratives that give dreams their meaning and power. The vessel-bearer nourishes the well itself, keeping its waters fresh and flowing, and Alina Lampkeeper holds the light that makes all the work visible, that maintains the boundary between what is and what might be." She gestured, and the four of them arranged themselves around the well's edge, each at their cardinal point, without needing instruction, as though the knowledge had always been within them, waiting for this moment. They began their work. Soraya spun her spindle, and new dream threads appeared, rainbow bright, weaving themselves into the nexus to strengthen and support the existing patterns. Faraz wrote in the air with his pen, and words of power and beauty traced themselves across the chamber, settling into the well's water like blessings. Layla poured from her vessel, and the water she added carried the essence of growth and renewal, feeding the dream source. And Alina held her lamp high, and its light illuminated everything, making the invisible visible, the hidden known. As they worked, they began to understand the deeper truth of the well. It was not separate from the city, but woven into it,
Every kindness shown in the waking world strengthened the dreams. Every beauty created fed the well. Every truth spoken cleared the channels. The boundary between sleeping and waking was not a wall, but a membrane, permeable, allowing each to nourish the other. And they understood something else. They were not the first 4 keepers to work together this way. The well was ancient, and throughout Qamara's history
They sat together in the garden as the sun rose higher, warming the frost-covered stones. Soraya explained how she had seen the pattern of all patterns, the master weaving that connected every thread. Faraz spoke of understanding, finally, what his poetry was meant to do, not just to describe beauty, but to create it, to add to the store of stories that sustained the human heart. Layla, youngest and perhaps wisest, talked about roots and nourishment, about how the smallest acts of care could feed the largest dreams. And Alina, listening to them, felt a profound gratitude. She was no longer alone in the work. The burden and the joy would be shared. The well would be tended by 4 pairs of hands instead of 1, 4 hearts instead of 1, 4 minds instead of 1. "We should meet regularly," she said, "to coordinate our tending, to share what we learn. Perhaps once a month, on the new moon, when the threads glow brightest." The others agreed readily. They would become a circle, a guild of dream keepers, maintaining the invisible infrastructure that allowed a city to sleep deeply and wake creatively. As they prepared to part and return to their daily lives, Karim appeared at the garden's edge, as though he had been expected. He held a small wooden box, and when he opened it, 4 silver pendants gleamed inside, each one engraved with a different symbol: a spindle, a pen, a lamp, and a vessel. "From your grandmother," he said to Alina. "The second memory she left with me showed her creating these years ago, hoping that one day there would be keepers to wear them. She asked me to present them when the circle was complete." He gave each of them a pendant, and when they fastened them around their necks, the silver warmed against their skin, recognizing them, claiming them. "There is a third memory, too," Karim said to Alina, "but that one is for later still, for when you have learned what you need to learn, when you are ready to understand the full depth of what has been given to you." Alina accepted this with a nod. There would be time for that memory, whatever it held. For now, it was enough to have found her fellow keepers, to have restored not just the well, but the circle of care around it. The winter sun climbed higher, and one by one the keepers departed to their daily work, Soraya to her loom, Faraz to his writing desk, Layla to her father's bakery, Alina to the lamp shop. But they carried with them the knowledge of their deeper work, the understanding that they were tenders of invisible things, maintainers of boundaries, keepers of the space where dreams and waking meet. And that night, when the people of Qamara settled into sleep, they rested more deeply than ever before, because the well was not just maintained but celebrated, not just tended but loved, by 4 who understood that the work of caring for dreams was the work of caring for life itself. In the dream chamber, the dream woman smiled and whispered a blessing that traveled through every channel, touched every thread, reached every sleeping mind. "May your dreams be clear and your waking bright. May the boundary between them be gentle and kind. May those who tend you do so with love, and may you wake to a world made more beautiful by what you dreamed. Up high above, in a small apartment above a lamp oil shop, Alina lay in her narrow bed and closed her eyes. She did not descend into the well that night. The others would tend it, learning their own relationships with the work. Instead, she simply slept, deeply and peacefully, dreaming of light and water and the faces of those who had joined her in the sacred task of keeping vigil over the sleeping city. And her grandmother, wherever she rested now, smiled.